Okay, everybody. Stephen Mead here with Domicile Real Estate. We are on a mission to help Southern California's renters become homeowners. This is our weekly first-time homebuyer market update in 5 minutes. I'm going to guess that, like most weeks, I will go over a minute or two. Just a couple things, right? Is we are now in October, and October usually brings a lot of changes in the market, especially for first-time homebuyers. And this year, things are not really doing what we expected. I'm going to jump in here to the stats and kind of walk you through it and kind of go over what normally happens around this time of year and then kind of what we're seeing. So let me bring up those stats here and we can start. As always, our point in discussion is to, one, give you information and maybe some tips and strategy. Two, talk about the affordability of housing for first-time home buyers. And then three, talk about the availability of housing for first-time home buyers. So if you look at our first chart here on price, we divide things into entry-level condos and then entry-level single-family homes. Our single-family home is a 3-bed, 2-bath, and our entry-level condo is a 2-bed, 2-bath. And we can take a look at our pricing here. And one of the things you'll notice about pricing is it's actually holding pretty steady. We see a little bit of a reduction here in the condo statistic, right? We had a high of 454 and now we hit a 440 roughly. But if you look back here, I think it's important to understand this as literally as a month ago, it was still 416, 500. So I wouldn't exactly call this a drop in pricing. I think what's really happening is kind of a steadiness in pricing. We'll have to see sort of where the stats go next week, but we are still over even where it was just 3 weeks ago. I think the overall trend here is still a slight positive. Things look a little bit different on the single family home front. You'll see things are a little bit steadier through here. We had some jumps, but it's really been pretty much a straight line. So, normally the pricing around this time of year, historically, what happens is our spring is really good. Summer is decent. There's a little bit of a bump. And then we have sort of a pretty decent early fall. And then things kind of trail off a little bit towards the end of the year. I actually don't think that's going to happen this year. And the reason why I don't think that's going to happen this year is I think we are still playing catch up for missed sales in the spring. We kind of went through a period where we were running at 50% capacity. I think the market just has a lot of transactions that still need to take place by the end of the year. So if we look at sort of our next slide here, which is our total monthly payment. This one is a favorite of mine just because this also incorporates interest rates. Rates remain pretty constant, but what you can see is sort of what kind of effect does price actually have on our payments? In the single family category, not that much. I mean, less than $20, a $19 difference. But if you look down here in our condo trend, that actually made a noticeable difference, right? That's about a $60 difference. In fact, it's exactly a $60 difference. What does, I always like to put a reference to these numbers, right? What does $60 actually mean in a market like this? Well, if the payment goes down $60 a month, that actually means you can afford to spend about $12,000 more and have the same payment. So, if you said our budget was, let's go back to the chart here. Last week when we were looking at the statistic, and remember, we're talking about this is based on a 5% down payment, excellent credit score, and this includes taxes, insurance, mortgage insurance. This is sort of really a true total cost housing payment. If your budget was $28.19, but because that median price dropped a little bit, how much more could you spend? Well, you can spend almost exactly the amount of the drop, about $12,000, and still end up with the same payment. I think this is always useful to know. If we jump over to our minimum household income requirement, this one's kind of a favorite of mine. It really says how much money, how much income does your household need to show as a minimum if you had no other debts to qualify for the payment on these houses at 5% down. As you can see here, again, this dropped a little bit along with the payment. We expect that. A small drop, $500 a year in our single family category, but actually a $1,500 drop or about $100 a month here in our condo category. So I think the message here is that prices are pretty much holding steady. They're not really dropping in any big capacity. I am going to watch this condo one next week so we can revisit and talk about that. Now, if we're going to move on to our availability, that's really where things have kind of taken a bizarre turn this year. Sorry, don't mind the fried egg t-shirt here. This is how my brain feels sometimes when compiling real estate statistics. Normally, when we enter the fall, first-time homebuyers get a bit of a reprieve. That sort of crazy summer where it just feels like every house you put an offer in on has 10 offers on it already. Normally the fall is when we get that reprieve where it's still a busy market, but it doesn't feel quite as hectic. And this year, I mean, I think it might not be quite as hectic, but it is still very hectic, and I'm going to kind of explain why. So if we look at our first thing, absorption rate, both of our categories are above 80%. And what is our absorption rate, right? Our absorption rate looks at this. It says how many new listings were input into the MLS in the last week, right? So that would be our supply, as it were. And then we look at how many homes went into escrow in the last week, and that's sort of our demand. Well, whenever you're seeing if 100 houses came into the MLS and 85 went under contract, there's you're pretty much eating up all the new houses that are coming into the marketplace. I mean, that really is very high, and that indicates an extremely strong market. If you look here, you can see that our condo market, which has traditionally been a bit lower, is actually sort of meeting our single family home market. So these markets are pretty well matched. We didn't see that except back in the end of August. So, in some ways, this market has actually gotten more competitive as we have entered the fall. Now, if you look at our weak supply of homes, that kind of tells another story as well, right? We've actually seen that our condo market, this is kind of just eroded, right? At one point we had 8 weeks of supply. Now we're down to about 7 weeks of supply. And our single family home has really remained constant. We have about just under 4 weeks, the same as we've pretty much had the whole time. Last week, we had a little bit of a lull, but I mean, really, this number is traded in the same range. So how does this affect you, and how does this help you make decisions if you're a first-time home buyer, right? Now, normally we would tell people that sort of prime time to buy a house, probably my personal favorite time. If buyers ask me, when is my favorite time to show property and to also write offers for clients, it is the period of time between Thanksgiving and New Year's. I'm not so sure that time is going to be particularly great this year. And I'm going to tell you why. I think there are a lot of buyers in the marketplace now that might be a little frustrated, and any sort of relief that happens during that time period, those buyers are just going to swoop in. I don't see a lot of people pulling out from the market, buyers saying they're going to take a break during that time period as we normally see. So, if you're a first-time home buyer, right, I think you have a couple of concerns, right? Your biggest concern, right, is that interest rates are going to move on you before you find a house. So the thing that I tell first-time home buyers, and if you're watching this sitting on the sideline, is, some of this sounds a little doom and gloom, right? It's a very tight market. There's tons of offers. And I'm not going to lie, it's not the easiest time for first-time home buyers to buy a house, but I think it's definitely one of the best times. And the reason why is when you get that low interest rate, you lock that in essentially for life, meaning you can have that mortgage full all the way to term and keep that interest rate. Really, it's an unprecedented opportunity that just doesn't exist. The other thing that I want to tell first-time home buyers is, especially in our condo category, right? If you look at that amount of money that is required, right? I think this week we're in the high $60,000 range. Well, even if you're not in that range of income, think for a moment for if you had a friend or somebody else that you could buy a 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo with, that means the income required from each of you is only in the low 30,000s. That really opens up Southern California homeownership to a lot of people. Is sort of that co-buying experience perfect? No, of course it isn't. But versus renting a 1-bedroom apartment by yourself for $2,000 a month, I think that's really a great opportunity for someone to save on their expenses and get into ownership themselves. Anyhow, as always, thank you so much for watching. Please do like and subscribe. We have our regular whole market update, which comes in on Monday. So if you are on YouTube, definitely check us out. That'll come up, and hit that notification bell. If you are not watching this on YouTube, Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you'll see those videos too when we post them. Anyhow, have a great weekend, everybody. Happy house hunting. And as always, comments or questions, we love them. And if you'd like to work with us, we'd love to hear from you too. Have a great weekend, everybody.